Well, we're live at Longview Museum of Fine Arts on a Sunday afternoon to have conversations with the curator. We're going to talk about Velox Ward, one of Longview's nationally known artists. And with us today is Andrew Walker and from the Amon Carter Museum, and our very own Derek Frazier, who is our curator of collections and our art historian and our preparator and our only dude on staff.
Yeah. So I lift all the heavy stuff.
Yes. So, and thank you to our studio audience. So I guess we're going to get started and open with what brought this all to be. So behind us, I'll just say these 13 prints that are behind us and around the walls are part of our permanent collection. And Derek's going to tell how we found these in our permanent collections. These are small museum problems.
That's right. Found in collection,
found
as it's often called.
Yes, that is a common thing. You'll say found in collection because museums, as they started out, they started by volunteers. They had many different directors. There are volunteers taking care of things, and records were not always just
best practices wasn't common lingo back in the day.
Yes, so. And. Anyway, so tell what happened.
Well, usually found in collection doesn't include Roy Lichtenstein. If you look back behind us, you'll see that red rectangle. That is a portfolio. It's red, white, and blue covered cardboard. And I was going through and I was just kind of documenting the collection. We had about maybe 30% of it cataloged at the time. So I opened up this big giant portfolio and I found some interesting things in there. I found some cutouts that I knew were related to Velox Ward. I thought, well, that's really cool, right? We have some of those. And so I moved those over. I was wearing my nice nitrile gloves at the time. I read this information about something called America, the 3rd century. And I thought, well, that's weird to see that in there with some Velox Ward stuff, an East Texas artist, that we all know from East Texas. And then I kept going through, and then I found the print back there by Steve Rosenquist, and I was like, well, that's interesting because he's one of the first pop artists in the United States. What in the world is he doing in there? So I kept on going, and then I found Roy Lichtenstein. And as you know, he is probably in the top 10 most important 20th century American artists of all time. And then I kept going, and then I found one that was by Robert Rauschenberg. I kind of choke up when I say it. Robert Rauschenberg was one of my favorite artists, and he was kind of predates the pop artists. He kind of paved the road for people like Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein and some others. And at that time, I think when I got to that, my heart kind of froze up a little bit. And I picked it up like this, and I was very careful with it. And I kind of walked into Tiffany's office, and I was holding it like this. And she could, I guess my eyes must have been doing this. Because she said, what's wrong with you? And I croaked out the word, Rauschenberg. And so we went through the rest of the collection and everything in that portfolio, and all of these. Christo was in there. Raymond Saunders, a neo-expressionist who's from the West Coast, very similar to Jean-Michel Basquiat, was in there. And all of these super, super famous artists.
Is there a Ruchet? Is it Ed?
Yes, Ed Ruchet, right back here. A lot of pop artists were included in this portfolio. And then Velox Ward was in there also. And we were dumbfounded.
You thought it was a mistake, didn't you?
I had no idea. Yeah, exactly. Because how could Velox Ward, our East Texas artist, be in this same collection with Rauschenberg and Christo and Lichtenstein? It didn't make any sense at all. And so we started doing some research. Would you like to address the research?
Yes. So then we started trying to figure it out. So the whole collection, we learned that the Smithsonian, during the bicentennial year, they did special exhibitions at every museum in Washington, D.C. But then they have a special entity that creates traveling exhibitions. And they created 200 traveling exhibitions to go around the country for all those people that could not come to Washington, D.C. to see these. So Mobil Oil Company or Corporation underwrote this exhibition. Well, what we learned is, and I'm gonna toss it back over to you, because before you get to Mobil Oil, the Amon Carter came involved. So we'll do a little toss back.
Well, when Derek and Tiffany presented this discovery during one of my visits here, I was perplexed by the question they were perplexed by, which was, why is Velox Ward in this group? Because from a point of view of national attention, he doesn't resonate, and he's not quote unquote modern like the other artists that were in the portfolio. So they call it a baker's dozen, right? And maybe he's the 13th to round it all out. But what we started talking about, because Velox Ward has a history with the Amon Carter in Fort Worth, that really generated from the support that Velox Ward had, from a gallerist in Dallas. His name was Donald Vogel, and he ran, and his son now runs the Valley House Gallery, which is still one of the premier. It's actually a gallery that is more like an institution, because not only has it a history, but it's done such important work in the understanding of both historic and contemporary American art that it has its own narrative, right? It warrants its own book. It warrants its own accolades within the industry more generally. And I know Kevin Vogel, the son of Donald Vogel, and I was like, well, I know that on our shelves in our historic holdings in the administration area, where we have every book that the Carter has published since 1961, that there's a book on Velox Ward. And that's it. It's not very big. You got to pay attention when you're looking at the spines. But because I have an affinity and interest in outsider painters, I knew that this had happened. So I sort of called Kevin up and learned that his father was not only a great admirer of Velox Ward's, but of memory painters in general, especially memory painters from Texas. And Derek, I don't know, how would you define that memory painter?
Well, thinking about the example that I know best is Velox Ward. He painted a lot of things from his past, things that represented his life, in rural Texas, whether it was in East Texas or West Texas or northern Arkansas or back to East Texas and back to West Texas. And he also worked some from photographs. So he was kind of maybe creating a world through his art that used to be or existed at one time in some form or another. Maybe not 100% truthful to reality, but his
as memories never are. Right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. As he remembered them.
Well, and maybe the most notable for all of you here is Grandma Moses would be perhaps the most widely recognized memory painter. And so not only is it, as Derek described, an attachment to personal experience as remembered, but it's also in a more untrained style, right? A more folk style the artist did. So you wouldn't have the high level realism that you might see not only in, well, none of these artists, but others from that era.
Right, absolutely.
Andrew Wyeth, for example, that sense of...
Who was one of Velox's big inspirations, by the way.
Oh, well, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah, Andrew Wyeth.
So what Donald Vogel did, I love this because I started, we have an archive of everything that Carter's ever done. And so I was digging around in the archives, and there's a letter from Donald Vogel from 1972, and it's springtime, and he writes to Mitch Wilder, the director at the time, and says, oh, it's spring. I wanted to plant a seed in your brain. How would you like to do an exhibition of Velox Ward like we did for
Aunt Clara.
Aunt Clara, thanks, Clara McDonald, who was another Texas born memory painter. And she was super well known because she got picked up in the 50s as somebody of note and was featured in exhibitions all over the country, including at MoMA in one instance when they were looking at, sort of what's going on in the United States at this time. So it resonated with Mitch Wilder, and he said, okay, we'll do that. And that led to a Texas-wide tour that was opened in Fort Worth in 1972 and traveled all over the state, including most locally here, Beaumont, Texas, which has an importance, which Tiffany will unveil and reveal in just a moment. But that exposure at the Carter and throughout Texas reinforced his significance. As we were talking earlier, the Carter has always done the Western story, right? The American West story, and especially in its first 2 decades, that was a feature of it. But Ruth Carter Stevenson, as she was known at her death, at the time, Ruth Carter Johnson, she was a very sophisticated, very connected, artistic, I don't want to say genius, although she was in many regards, but she was very plugged into the latest movements in the American art world. So she would have known all these other artists, and she was bringing that sense of cultural sort of elevation to Fort Worth, and that then went out into the world. So being exposed at the Carter, although I worked there, so I'm going to say nice things. But it was helping to elevate his exposure, certainly. And that was true. Yeah. And what we began to discuss was, well, perhaps it was this exposure that he had through Donald Vogel, who again was nationally known as a gallerist and a very smart man in the art world, brought to the Carter and sent all over Texas, but that began to give Velox Ward a notability and a notoriety that perhaps made him attractive to Mobile when they were making this choice. And I think what's important, and Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, they wanted this portfolio of 13 works to show what was going on in America.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was an addition of 200?
200 prints. And then ours is actually a set of 25. It's the Ors Commerce, and so we have number 7 of 25.
So each artist that participated, these 13 artists, they were given a run of 25 prints. This is the one that Velox had in his house, 25. That means this Roy Lichtenstein, there were only 25 of that run done. Mm-hmm. They did a larger run of 200 that they made available to the public. Mm-hmm. And if you go, these are easy to find online at museums like MoMA, Met, the Guggenheim, but they're the 200 run. Mm-hmm. I have yet to find anywhere with this 25 edition.
I'm sure they're in the artist collection. That would be interesting.
They're
actually,
in the artist collection,
or the artist's estate, or whatever
Right.
it might be at this point.
Right.
But it increases value, right? That's an important thing, because the 25 would probably be of a higher grade in any event, but maybe not. I don't know. I don't know enough about pulling lithographs.
Well, Kevin Vogel, I talked to Kevin, who's Donald's son, and there's a whole lot of things about printing that I don't fully understand all of it. But one of the things that was interesting is we do think every artist got a set of the 25. And where am I going with this? Do what?
12 more.
Value.
The value of it.
Well, one thing, if you don't mind me
It'll
jumping
come back to
in,
me.
one thing that's super exciting to me as a nerd about this dialogue that Derek, Tiffany, and I were triangulating was, okay, so maybe that's a piece of the puzzle, right? There was an energy behind him that really began in the early 70s that culminated in 72, and then he reemerges in this company of 13. So, okay, we can start saying, well, perhaps that was part of it, why he was included, because he's very different than all of these other artists who arguably are aesthetically more experimental. And then I turned to Tiffany, I was like, well, what the heck is Mobile doing in all of this?
Well, that's what we were started thinking, because I'm from Beaumont, and Mobile has offices down there and big refineries and plants. And then Rauschenberg is from Port Arthur, and I was like, well, maybe, this is oil community, maybe there's things. And so, and ended up talking to Kevin Vogel, and he tells me, he said, oh, well, his dad, loved memory painters. And so he really supported that. And they had the show. He said, but what happened was after the Carter show, Mobile contacted Velox because they wanted the rights to one of his paintings to have a billboard done. And I haven't yet discovered what that painting is, but we're going to find that out.
Does anybody remember a billboard in Texas of Velox Ward looming over the racing cars along the highway?
Yeah, so who knows? But they paid, so this is in 1973 or 4, and they paid him $12,000 for this. So that's a great sum of money. Well, and then what Andrew and I were talking about, just how real the art community is, and the gallery, and the relationships, artists can be temperamental. Art. And what I was going to say about what he told me about the portfolio is that gallery, they would take a set like this if they had it and break it up, because the Lichtenstein's more valuable than the Velox, or it's more valuable than, so they're going to, you can find the Lichtenstein for 20 grand on eBay or something, So the fact that we have a whole set all together is important. And Kevin really, he's in fact Velox Ward Jr., because that's how the museum acquired this set. I think Velox Ward Jr. didn't have any children, and his dad had left his estate to him. Well, then when he passed away, he left it to the LMFA. And
so terrific. Isn't that a great story?
And so I was actually on the board at the time and was in the home looking through things, and Carol might have been with us, and we came across, so this is the actual the house my daddy built, the actual painting that the print is made from. And so what Kevin was telling me is that most of these are actual lithographs where they're hand signed and it's an actual print, but that this is a print of a painting. So it's a little different. I think that one and that one are different than the others.
This is done through a technique called collotype, which is a very bizarre, complicated combination of printing, photography, and lithography. It kind of puts those two things together, and it's very complicated, and it's been replaced by newer technologies now. You can't really find anywhere that does that type of printing anymore. It's really unusual type of printing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it probably, not to be so crass, but I would imagine this portfolio individually, but more importantly as a group owned by one of the artists, it's probably $200,000 to $300,000 as in total.
Let's hope so. We don't know. And so back to why the portfolio ended up in our vault and that we didn't know it. So when we acquired Velox Ward's entire estate, including his home, his property, all the contents, it was a group of dedicated volunteers, board members, guild members. We were all in there gathering things up. Well,
Did you have gloves on?
Yeah. So, but I remember we opened that portfolio, and when you opened it up, it was, so there's a little cutout there, and we'll talk more about that, but there was all this tracing paper, and there were these drawings, and there was these sketches and things that Velox had done, these pre-drawings before he did his paintings. And we were like, okay, that's great. We'll look at that later. And we put it in a flat file.
Yep.
Small museum problems. We've never had a curator of collections. It was always the director or an assistant that was doing their best to try to preserve the art and care for it.
Certainly no art historians.
There was no art historians. So fast forward 10 years later, and Derek's in there and comes and is like, Rauschenberg, and what is the, and so that's, it's an exciting time for the museum as we are building and refining our best museum practices.
Not to build off refining, but The back to mobile.
Yeah, back to mobile. Choo-choo-choo.
So my question was to Tiffany, not only because it's East Texas, right, and mobile was the refinery was in Beaumont.
Mm-hmm.
The exhibition that the Carter organized went to Beaumont, as did, we think, this show of the prints.
Yes.
So would you think that part of their interest was they wanted to celebrate a talent that was just around the corner?
I think so. I think that was part of it. And this might be a good segue into we also talked about what was going on in the time period. And Derek might want to talk a little bit more about that. I mean, the 70s were a little tumultuous with.
Yeah, the thing that fascinates me about art is putting it into historical context and understanding it for what it is, a product of its time. I was born in 1968. The first president that I remember was the guy that was stumbling down all the time, falling downstairs, Gerald Ford, falling all over the place. I remember him in 75, I think it was when the fall of Saigon happened.
Yep.
And before that, I was thinking about like what was going on, culturally. There was, on TV, there was like the Waltons. Remember the Waltons?
Yeah.
Little House on the Prairie. I was talking to Tiffany, I mentioned Holly Hobby, and she's like, "Oh, Holly Hobby, I
I have
Holly
one
Hobby."
of those. It's at my
What
mother's
is
house.
Holly Hobby? Does anybody know? Did anybody have one?
Yeah, we have.
So who is she?
Holly Hobby was an artist who developed this sort of like a Little House on the Prairie-esque kind of doll or
Yeah, with the bonnet and the apron.
Oh, yeah.
And
The anti-Barbie?
well, we could coin that right
I like
now.
that idea. That's a good question.
No. But it was a throwback to a simpler time.
And also Hee Haw, right?
Oh, yeah.
Was that like, I think Saturday at 6 o'clock maybe is when Hee Haw came on. So all of these things were really, really, important in the zeitgeist of what America was like. And there was this huge interest, obviously there's this huge interest of, looking back at the good old days and sort of a nostalgia that was building up. Watergate, people were sick of that garbage, and all that. And Vietnam, that had enough of that. And, and my favorite thing that I was thinking about was there used to be an ice cream chain called Swenson's. And they had one here, right? You remember it was like, and in Houston, and I knew the one in Tulsa, and it was like the setting or the theme was like the gay 90s, it was like this old-timey ice cream parlor, and it was like where you went. I was like dirt poor when I was little, and that was like if something big in your life went right, you got to go to that ice cream place. But that was like a part of this whole thing, this whole looking back at things that were simpler time, and maybe things made more sense, and they weren't, those, and I think Velox's art really just was there at the right time. And when, he's looking back at his memories of when he was young. He was born in 1901, I think. So he's got these stories that he's telling through his art, and that's really what it is. Every one of his stories is a narrative. Every one is a narrative. The titles.
Yeah, this is Sunday wash day, and that's what he remembered. They all did the wash on Sunday. Here's a whole series of the reading room, and we have one in the vault. The reading room was your outhouse with your Sears Roebuck catalog, which was your important papers.
It was so important to him. He did nine of them.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
9 reading rooms?
Yes.
9 reading rooms.
Yes.
We
And
need to find all those.
We have number
us.
3. We have number 3.
That's pretty cool.
But anyway, I think that's why he was just at the right place at the right time, maybe with his art, and somebody picked him up and realized what he was doing was really what people were interested in. And Valley House is phenomenal. It's almost more than a gallery. It's it has enough influence to where it can probably shape art, at least in Texas, with who that they are representing and stuff. But you also have to remember, it's a gallery. They are there to make money. That's their purpose. That's not our purpose.
Well,
That's what they do. And they do it really, really well. And that's why they've been around for 40 years or whatever. And they have an incredible reputation, not just for being successful with their artists, but at being involved with art in general.
well, I shared this with both Tiffany and Derek when I was digging around, because this doesn't always come out, right? There's always the story, the affirmative story, and then there's always the story that doesn't always get told. And sometimes it's just a clue. So in the letter I was referencing, where I'll just read this real quickly. As spring is here, he's writing to Mitch Wilder, and it's planting time, I thought it would be well to see if we could plant the idea of having an exhibition of Velox Ward. He is once again back with me, and I think this time for good. And I was like, well, did they break up? At some point?
Yeah, there's a story there.
And they did, and more than once. And in fact, after that project was done, and I'll let Derek tell the other part, that they were done. They didn't have an association anymore. Velox Ward wanted to be on his own, market his own work, sell his own work. He didn't want the big city boy getting in the way necessarily. And I don't know why that happened.
Well, Kevin said it was, after he got the mobile billboard and got $12,000, he's like, well, heck, I can just represent myself. And so that's when he sort of took it back. And so that's when he started doing commissions, I think, and or more. And we did several shows here, at the other location at the museum. And yeah, I think so. Let's see. Do we want to talk about?
Well, one of the things that I'm super interested
Yes.
in, that again, your collection here sort of brought to my attention, and once you scratch the surface, you start finding it other places, was these cutouts.
Yes.
And I'd never heard of that as a process.
Right there.
And that's something that there's one right there, and then that's a little bit different because it's a sketch, right? More of a sketch.
It's more of like a pattern. That's when.
Yeah.
It really is.
So
It's like a
Velox, Derek told me this, and I just read it too in the book. So Velox's mother was a seamstress, and weren't they from Germany, or they had some German relatives? Well, she had a German sewing machine, and on the bottom, the brand was Velox, and it said speed and accuracy. And so Velox was like, that's me. I'm speed and accuracy.
And that's literally why she named him that, was because it was on her favorite sewing machine.
She was under pressure to find a name, looked over, and there was a sewing machine.
But we were talking earlier as we were preparing this, and then looking at this is the actual pattern for this painting that he did. And it's like a sewing pattern. It has little dots and it has all the things. And these cutouts is how he would work on the composition for his paintings. So we can't think of any other artist that has this exact process, where he's making a pattern that looks like a sewing pattern and then doing cutouts.
I mean, the only thing that we've at the Carter, we did an exhibition in 2014, I think it was, on a 19th century artist named George Caleb Bingham. Is that a name that's familiar to anyone? You know his work? And if you open up a history textbook, you'll likely see his election series as a demonstration of that democratic process. He did a triptych that went through the whole process. But the point is, he was untrained. He lived in Missouri, and he was from Arrow Rock, Missouri. He taught himself, and he was a politician as well as a booster for growth and expansion. Not quite a developer in terms that we understand it today, but in his day, yes, he was. And part of that developing notion was creating narrative scenes that suggested that the Midwest, the West at that time, was an opportunity, right? So we did a show about his river paintings. He did a whole series of about 18 paintings between 1845 and 1852 that showed the Mississippi and Missouri River as a bastion of memories, right? and they were very realistic, but they were about this changing moment, just like Derek was describing, that certainly Velox was aware of, and he captured a simpler time. But what I found fascinating was he did the same darn thing, just slightly different. So these were large-scale paintings usually. They were often complicated. At the most it would be 20 or 30 figures.
Right.
But what he did in Arrow Rock, he would get sometimes models, but mostly people in town. They'd sit for him. He'd sketch them very accurately. And then he'd take that drawing, which was on thin paper, he'd pin it to the canvas, and he'd pounce it so that it was transferred onto the canvas. And he could move them around to try to figure out what the most satisfying composition would be without taking the risk. And any artist in the audience today will hopefully understand this better than I do, that doing a multi-figure composition or any complicated large-scale composition, you can mess that up pretty quickly, and there's not a lot of that's why I think abstraction came into play. But in any event, he was. But these are beautiful, and we have.
We'll talk later about that.
Yeah, exactly. But when I worked at the St. Louis Art Museum, the museum had like over 300 of those drawings, and you literally could take those drawings and match it to the figures in the painting, and guess what? They were exactly the same size. So I sort of thought when we were talking was there's precedent for the process in order to create stories and to create the most satisfying composition. And Derek was sharing with me earlier that he was so, right, you said he was almost obsessed with perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I'm kind of hard-pressed to think of another artist who is so meticulous in creating perspective, especially with all the wooden buildings that he draws. It's almost to the point of obsessiveness with the 2 or 3, even 3-point perspective.
What was the tagline for Velox again?
Speed and accuracy.
There you go, right there. He's manifesting it.
Yes.
But I think that's this is from the side of view of scholarship. As the art historian next to me would perhaps hopefully agree, that's the kind of advance that having the archive, that the family allowed to come here, and that you have the whole range of experience of the artist making, you begin to understand not just, oh, it's a great painting and it was blah, 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 but you can say, well, this is what he did to sit down in the morning to understand that he wanted to create something. That's great.
Or in his footsteps, I'm not sure. It's in his footsteps.
We gotta talk about the stained glass windows, because this was the original church, right, before they tore it down.
The original church, Trinity Episcopal Church. And if you'll notice, the painting here in the side does not look Episcopal. It looks Baptist. And they were tearing the building down, so they had already removed their window. And he said, guess what? I have put in a window, and you're going to love it. So I went out to see. I said, but Velox, that doesn't look Episcopal. He said, it's Baptist. So he said, you have an Episcopal church with a Baptist window.
That's great. So he had a sense of humor, it sounds.
Oh, yes, he was delightful. He really was. I just considered him one of my favorite people in the world. And he had a little twinkle in his eye, so he was kind of a little bit of a flirt.
Well, wasn't he kind of retired and not doing commissions anymore, but somehow he chose to do your commissions?
Yes, he wasn't doing paintings anymore, and so he did the roost and the church. And anyway, part of the gift is being with him. He was just a wonderful man.
Dorothy, can you talk? So I'm not obviously from here. What is the What is the roost?
Oh, Robin's Roost was my family lake house.
Oh.
And it was, everybody used to go to the roost. The church would go, the garden clubs would go, everybody would go. My parents let everybody use it.
And it looks like a very modern.
No, it was old. It
Was?
Uh-huh.
It looks so contemporary. Yeah.
Very mid-century.
Is it still there?
It's still there. Yeah.
Wow.
In the front right-hand corner after this, he's got a little sign there, and doesn't it say the roost, but then he put robins on top of the little sign?
He did.
So he just,
Oh, that's funny. That's super funny.
yeah.
To represent her father, her mother, her sister, her brother. It's 5 of them,
Uh-huh.
and there are 3 little ones. And that's her parents in the yard.
A
And
mother-
her father always had a white shirt and had a tie on.
Is that right?
Didn't matter what time of year it was.
If you
You
would-
never saw him in jeans.
That was
If you
even
went-
on the weekend?
He was very English. Yeah.
Even fishing, he wore a tie.
No kidding.
He did.
You would see him not wearing that was when someone dropped something of value into the lake and he had to go fish it out.
Yeah. Anyway, he was a delightful man, and I enjoyed the time that I visited with him. So
Did now the big one, this one, the famous one, that you all have all the work around, is that recognized? Is that a place that's recognizable in your community?
No, I don't think so. I think this was his father's house, so I don't know if it was in Longview. Derek, do you remember where it was? So he may have done some of this from photos, but all the little additions that, here's little footprints for the dog, and then here's the chickens, and then maybe this is his granddad and the window.
And
There's
Dorothy, I think he got the idea about the shingles on the roof and snow right here in this painting.
solved the problem. And you can tell he has a sense of humor because the dog footprints go out to the pole and then go back again.
Oh, that's so funny. But
That's cute.
that's very
That's the
cute.
outhouse.
And we should say too that he moved his family. They would have a business in one place and it wouldn't do that well, so then they would move to West Texas, and then they would start up another business, and then that would thrive for a while, and then something would happen, and then they'd move back to East Texas, and then they'd move back to West Texas, and then they moved up to northern Arkansas where his father died, and he was in 7th grade. He had to drop out of school to help support the family. Moved back to Texas. They moved back and forth several times. And it was the part of Texas that they were moving, West Texas, was just south of where the Panhandle is. Some Crowell, I think, is one of the little towns. Mm-hmm. Just a bunch of little towns around in there. And he, one of the jobs that we were going to talk about a little bit was, for years he ran a shoe repair business, and we were wondering if that might have been where he got the idea for using his cutouts for patterns for repairing shoes. That's purely conjecture on our part, but we were thinking, but we all kind of thought of it at the same time. We went, That'd be
Makes
cool.
sense, doesn't
Yeah,
it, you
Yeah,
know?
it does. So
So he's borrowing from another part of his experience to advance a new interest. I think
that's
great.
just something we've been batting around.
But it's true. It's true now. So
It's true. Well, and I didn't realize, he just taught himself to paint when he was 60 years old. He read a book on perspective or something, and the next thing you know, he was a painter. But he was a jack of all trades. He was a wrestler. He was a preacher. He was a...
Tell that car story. That was
Oh
fascinating.
my gosh. So, and I forgot how old he was with this, but he went and applied for, was it Chrysler? Some kind of Chevrolet car company needed an automobile painter. And so he went and applied, and they said, great, you'll start on Monday. He said, terrific. And then he went down to the next county and went to a body shop and said, hey, can I watch you paint this car? And he watched him on Friday and Saturday and went to work on Monday, and no one knew he wasn't a car painter. And so he just figured it out.
And he built half an airplane before he had to move.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean,
He
Shoe shop right down the street.
oh, he did?
He
Yeah.
did? Right here in Longview?
right. Yep.
And
He sure did.
things up on the walls sometimes, and it was on methane, not in front of the courthouse, but a little farther down, just a little hole in the wall thing.
I'll be darned. I
And
didn't.
he was doing repair there, or was he?
That's where he did his shoemaking.
That's great.
Wow.
And he had a dog named Muggs. And he had a dog named Muggs. And Muggs would sit around in the store window front, and people would try to guess if he was a statue or a real dog because he was very still. And Muggs appears in a lot of his paintings. If you look closely, it's the same dog. It's Muggs.
And he used the hair, the tail of the dog,
For his brushes?
make his brushes very fine.
For the very
Really?
small detail work. Uh-huh.
Use the hair. And Vera, do you have some stories that you'd like to come share about your experience with?
I'd like to tell you about the great art.
Come sit over here for just a minute, if you would get by the microphone. And
And then you're going to be on TV. So
yeah, just sit
Yeah.
right there, and that way you can be on the microphone, and I'll sit back there.
Well, I don't care how old I am because I just want to keep living. I'm having a good time. When I first came to Longview, I'm also self-taught. God gifted these hands. And I had a little job here. I was young. I was in my early 20s, maybe 21 or 22. I came from Kilgore, grew up over there. And so somewhere this woman came into the shop where I was working at the time and told me about, I don't know how we got on the subject, but she said, well, honey, we have a little art group that we get together and we paint. And so she said, why don't you come and join us? And of course I said, yes. So out on Highway 80, I'm going to say past Highway 80 Rescue Mission, y'all know where that is. That next old building that's red rock, native rock building, that's a Longview office where you can also, do tax things in there. It had kind of a basement, and so that's where they were meeting. And we met for years, and Velox came and was one of our members. So we would, somebody that painted well would get down here and would be the lecture demonstration and sit down here and bring their paints and paint, and we would all pull our chairs around and watch and learn. That's how we learn, from watching other people. And so it was just a wonderful experience, and so we were all comfortable with him. We didn't know he was going to be doing this, but at the time he was not quite this advanced. He was still learning. And we had, long before Longview Museum and Fine Arts, long before Junior Service League put together the paintings that we have here to begin it all, this was Longview's, Gregg County's first little art group. And I have a newspaper clipping of our officers or something, I think, in some of those things that I brought, Tiffany. And so we would then decide, yes, we're going to all get together, and we all took our work to the Gregg County Fair. It's going on now, or I think, out here to the fairgrounds. And we set up, you know, and we volunteered to come work and stay there with the paintings and everything. We had blue ribbons and red ribbons and things. We had
Oh, how
judges.
fun.
It was a wonderful life. But he was such a character. And
Did he have a twinkle in his eye?
I'm sorry, what?
Did he have a twinkle in his eye?
I'm sure he did. And and then when the book was coming out, or maybe it had been issued, I knew about that. I don't remember when he died or where he's buried. Do you all know?
Don't remember.
Oh, he's buried here. It's off of,
Memory Park?
yes.
But he died in the late 70s, didn't he? I think. Is that possible, Derek?
Sounds right.
I guess
Late
I went on with my
79,
life and things
maybe?
got exciting and I just kind of, we lost track. But let's see what was going to tell you next. We all, there's some clippings too. There was a Windermere School here in Longview for disadvantaged children that needed a little bit of help in school, and they could go there full-time or part-time. And so then the group sponsoring them would ask all of us artists to please contribute something, and they would have an art auction. And then that's how they made money. So they publicized it a lot. And so there was some paintings, news clippings, where they would put it in the paper. But I remember there's one that I had to, they wanted Velox in the painting, so we went out to his home. What street was that on? Do you know, Tiffany? I couldn't find it now. He just lived in some woods, and there was a little trail off the street.
Fourth
and-
Avenue, Dorothy?
Oh, he had the most interesting house
Fourth.
you can imagine, with all these things he collected and all of his paint, and you know, it was just like a bachelor lives.
Yeah.
And so we have a painting. They took a photo out there that day. We did it out in, but there's the 4x8 is in it. This was the cover they got for that.
Yeah, hold it up.
There's an 8x10 glossy that's better. This is how he lived.
wow,
See,
that's
this is
cool.
his yard and his house and all these little things around it. So we just posed out there. I don't know what year that is. It might be on the back.
Well, it's in the paper right here.
1975.
Well, he was a dear. Oh, I know what I wanted you to know.
1975?
That when my son, we lived out in the Judson area, and when Mitch was in the 6th grade is when Judson schools and all the schools of Texas taught Texas history. And I love Texas history, so I was just wanting to make sure that they learned it really well. And I only had one child, so I had to, I wanted to be in the middle of his life and PTA and the whole thing. So I asked Velox if he would come to the school and I would introduce him on the stage for the auditorium, and would he tell all these children, because they had his book in their classroom. And I told them, bring your book with you when he's here. And so they could look at his paintings, He just told them every story you can imagine. And I had my little recorder, and I put it over here and put a button on it. Well, some little tape, And he just told them the most interesting stories about what he did to make a living. He had been a wrestler.
So many
he had
things.
been
When he was a wrestler, his wrestling name was Bullet Head.
Is that true?
Yes.
Anyway, I haven't thought about that tape. I have everything I ever owned, so I know I've got that tape in a box or a file, so I'll get it out and see if we can play it somehow.
So this is the Texas history book, and these are his pictures in there. So that's pretty fun that this was Homes of the Pioneers. So he really was documenting our history.
And what year was the book?
So this is the Texans. I actually kind of remember this book. It's got 1977, 76.
70. This is my son's signature.
Yeah,
He had 79, it says.
But the first one says 76.
Oh, yeah.
And it was new at 76.
So that's the same time as
Yep. Is this?
the
It
Bicentennial
all
Project.
kind of came out.
So he's really,
exciting.
this is his moment, it sounds like.
Yeah, this was in the Longview paper with his book. And let's see what's on there. I've got bunches hanging here instead of on my head.
Velox Ward Paintings to Illustrate textbook.
October of '77.
Yeah.
So,
So
he
fun.
liked all of that publicity. He was quite a character.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories. Well, what do we have? Any other things that we want to share about Velox Ward? I hope this has fleshed out a little bit more of why he's an important artist in our, in East Texas, but also for the nation. He's really encapsulated part of our history from the pioneer days. And we also have a painting in our collection. His dad had a sawmill, and then it went bankrupt, but there's a picture of his dad in a suit, doing the sawmill and all the things. And so really was just documenting.
They had this sawmill, and they were cutting oak for wagons to lay down to make for the wagons. Well, then World War I started, and the military changed the size of the wagons. So they had tons of wood that was cut for the wrong size. So that was one of the kind of typical of what they would do. They'd say, oh, well, and then go on to the next thing. Well, let's move back to West Texas.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
They're like, we're done here.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do. I got 300 boards
That are useless.
Yeah. Really interesting, fascinating stuff.
Well, it's a lot, I'll say that, at the Carter, we're very self-aware at moments that you want to own an artist, right? So recently we did an exhibition on Scott and Stuart Gentling.
Yes.
If those are artists that resonate, they were very important in the North Texas in the same era, actually, but they died in 2008, I think, both of them. And this is your guy to own, I think, as you can continue going forward. We've even talked about maybe collaborating on a project down the line when you have your new beautiful museum across the way, to really put a point on, to be able to tell these stories and more about Velox Ward. So both of you need to get oral histories recorded for the archives at Longview about your memories of Velox. That would be really terrific. So,
Were there any questions or anything from the Peanut Gallery?
For the Peanut Gallery?
For the Peanut Gallery. Well, thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us, and Derek. And it's been so fun. I've loved learning all about Velox. It just makes me appreciate not only East Texas, but Texas history, and proud to be an American, all the things. I mean, it's just.
thanks, Tiffany. Thanks,
Yeah.
Derek.
Thank you. Well, I just want to thank y'all all for joining us today. This was really fun to learn more about Velox Ward and our history, and I look forward to learning more.